Thank you, Nick. That was very good, and we were delighted to have you. I'm going to invite the last session to make their way up to the stage. When I was thinking about putting this last panel together, I thought, okay, I'm going to take some of my favorite analysts who typically moderate for us. They typically moderate a panel of vendors and turn it around and put them on the hot seat and get a vendor. To bring out some of all their, they are all pretty headstrong. They speak their minds. They don't hold their tongues. So certainly when I did that, when they all agreed to be on this panel, I thought, okay, who can manage these guys? And if any of you know Treb, he was the first that came to mind. And then last week, it surprised me because they were exchanging emails, and I couldn't believe all the love that was going on in these emails. It was, but we agree on everything. And I said, well, that's not what I want this session to be about. I want you guys to talk controversial. So I put the challenge down. So I expect you to disagree, talk about all the controversial things that are out there right now, and let's make the last session a great one.
You want us to disagree, I think that's what right? You want us to disagree and fight.
Yes. Okay. Knock down, drag out.
The nature of every good panel, everybody agrees it's just a speaker. I don't know if I need to introduce anybody here, or if I do, then it means you guys haven't been at the same conference I've been at for the last 7 years. But real quick, we have Jeff Kaplan from THINKstrategies. We have Phil Wainewright from Procullux and EuroCloud, and of course my favorite ZDNet column, and Bill McNee from Saugatuck Technology. For those of you who do the space, these are probably the three most respected voices out in the community on software as a service initially, especially on software as a service, and on the greater areas of cloud. So the problem we're going to have is that they may be over our head in terms of the discussions. But I'm going to start off with Phil, because very quickly in the back, Phil said you didn't agree with what Nick was saying.
I hope you'll forgive me for saying this, but I think that there's a flaw in the analogy of the power industry as an analogy for what's happening in computing. I think it's great to say, hey guys, this is just like power generation, when you're going out to CIOs and other people who are feeling nervous about cloud and saying, look, it doesn't matter, this has been done before, it's fine to do it with computing. So that's great, and I think Nick has done a great job actually in helping the industry to find its feet and gain acceptance of this new model. But I think to look at the electricity, the history of the electric utilities, and to say it's all about centralization, it's a fundamental misconception of why we ended up with an electric power grid. Because I think that we ended up with an electric power grid because of A, it was a network, and B, it was standardization, because without standardization you don't have a network. And I don't think centralization was actually the key fundamental concept here. And I think the only reason that it went centralized is because that was what you did in the industrial era. And I think in the information era, we don't have to centralize. And in fact, if you look at the electricity grid today, you can see that it is decentralizing. That instead of concentrating generation into very large power stations, actually into nuclear power stations, the world is pulling back from that now. Instead, we're seeing the rise of wind farms. We're seeing the rise of people putting solar panels on their roofs and actually being able to feed electricity into the grid, into that shared, standardized network. And so I think that the lesson of the power utility industry is that computing, yes, is going to a network grid, is doing that because of standardization, but is not going to end up centralized. We're not going to end up dependent on 5 suppliers of computing to the entire world. And that, I think, is the fundamental misconception in the way that the big switch describes what's going to happen in the future. I think what's going to happen in the future is going to be much more decentralized and is going to be much more diverse in terms of the suppliers that we see.
More of a peer-to-peer than a centralized type of model.
Absolutely.
I think there's another issue here. which is the assumption that it's a serial set of things that have gone on, right? That the focus is around cloud computing, right? When in fact the revolution that we're in the midst of, that's turning into an evolution, there were a lot of parallel things going on, right? So some of the earliest cloud success stories was around software as a service, where it wasn't about cloud computing, the compute, it was around multi-tenancy and developing a new business model that allowed a service provider, and let's use Salesforce as an example, to bring a new economics and to bring a new level of value, and it wasn't about the compute per se. So I guess I see many of these initiatives are things that have occurred in parallel rather than being dependent.
And I think, Treb, you're going to have to forgive us. We're going to have to start by debunking other people's myths before we start debunking each other.
Well, do you remember that show back in the...
I'll throw in my part of the argument by saying, what does it matter? Because I think the fundamental premise, if there's a bottom line that I can confer on Nick, is it's all about the economics. So whether you call it centralized, or you call it this, or you call it that, the bottom line is there's a metaphor in this in terms of how a industry, in the case of the utilities, in one world, the software and hardware business in the other world, of finding through pooled resources a better economic model for sharing, in our case, compute power and application capabilities than what existed in the past.
But I think part of the problem there is that we're all technologists, we all focus on the technology bit. So yeah, it's all about sharing the computing, it's all about sharing the network, but actually we're seeing now new businesses coming up because we're sharing the software power to be able to do highly complex auctioning and reputation management in the network. We're seeing a lot of people starting to do things with big data because we're able to work with shared data. With shared traffic information, for example, about where the holdups are as people move about the network in a city. And so, don't make the mistake that we often do in this industry of continuing to talk about the technology when a lot of the opportunity is in the application and the data level.
And to that point, you look at the new generation of software developers, and they're not technologists and they're not even developers. They're people with a business idea who are finding simpler methods to code.
And hugely powerful business ideas now coming out of using this network.
I'm going to ask Bill on that one, so maybe we can get... Does everybody agree that software development is going to business people and the techs are out? Because it doesn't seem to me that techs are ruling the valley right now.
Well, the way I would put it is that the process is becoming more business driven. So business people are driving the process as opposed to the software people who got us into the mess in the first place.
I would generally say that business end users are more empowered today than they ever have been. But at the same time, in parallel, there is a significant amount of incredible innovation occurring amongst corporate America, corporate Europe. I mean, look at some of the big financial services companies, without me naming any names, clients that, first of all, they're not using these quote unquote PaaSes, by the way. They're using native, raw, open source stack, and they are innovating on that open source stack using private cloud technologies. And that is a lot of code. That's geekdom.
Yeah, well, Salesforce uses a lot of code as well. I mean, we still need geeks to do stuff, but the geeks are doing different things now. A lot more effort is going into things like user interface, whereas previously it used to be all down in the technology stack. Okay, if you still want to be a geek, you can go and do data scientist now. And become a rocket scientist at analyzing the big data field. But a lot of the developer opportunities now in computing in the application layer are about, how do I deliver ease of use in a mobile application rather than how do I get the maximum power out of a Linux stack.
Or how do you leverage the API-driven architecture that we're developing, and through a loosely coupled architecture, how do you bring the various pieces together? And that requires a different set of skills than yesteryear skills. I would agree with that.
I'm also a big fan that the average business user is far more technically capable than ever been in the past. The average 14-year-old uses, my daughter uses computers more than I did. she's a cheerleader, and I was the head of the computer club. So it's a different day and age generation coming in. But you've said it twice, and I've got to get on it because it's been my biggest frustration of the entire conference. And I don't want to hear someone's using it. I want to hear what it actually is. What actually, and I'm talking about the actual technologies. These are companies here who have to implement real solutions. So they have to go back tomorrow and talk to their developers and talk to their engineering staff. When they do, what is big data and how do you implement it?
Well, if you want, I'll kick it off,
Yeah.
and we'll get agreement and disagreement, I hope. I don't know what it is. No, I'm dead serious, right? So I'll give a few experiences that I've had recently, right? I ran a panel at one of these CIO summits, and it was a quote-unquote big data panel, right? And I had the chief scientist or head of BI from Citicorp on the panel. I had a guy who was the chief architect from Walmart on the panel. I mean, it was all these big corporate kind of, senior IT guys. And this was the big data panel. Now, I was asked at the end to step in, so I didn't assemble this group. I was brought to it. And I finally get to the panel, and we hadn't had a chance to do a big prep call. None of them knew anything about Hadoop, right? MapReduce. They considered big data large volumes of data, and they were mostly processing on DB2 or Oracle, and they were doing some complex stuff. They were doing predictive analytics, advanced analytics. So I think we have a challenge with language, right? And so for some people, big data means a very specific thing, right? And other people, it's a broader term. So it's really who you're talking to. Is that?
Yep, so I equate it to porn, right? I know it when I see it. And with that in mind, I'm not going to say how often I've seen it. With that in mind, I'm going to suggest that how you define big data is if you have more data than you know what to do with. And you don't know how to manage that data in an effective fashion so you can effectively access and use that data for whatever business purposes you happen to have in mind.
But I think it's important that it's also the approach that you use for discovering the useful information within that data, isn't it?
Well, the problem is the big data. What you do with it is how you analyze it and synthesize it and all the rest of it.
But this is a key point because if you've got a problem with the fact that you've got loads and loads of data, the big data is not the solution is a big exabyte to kind of analyze it all. The solution is to use stuff like Splunk or Hadoop or MapReduce based technologies to, and I'm getting out of my depth here with the technology because I like to look more at the business layer, but it is about what Donald Rumsden used to call the unknown unknowns, the stuff that you didn't even know about that you can discover by actually analyzing this huge wealth of data that's being thrown up by the fact that you're wiring up all these devices that everyone is using and recording all the transactions that are taking place, where everyone is going, where everyone is carrying their smartphones, how many people are on your website and what they're doing, and you cannot physically predict what you will find when you look at that data. You need machines and algorithms to help you do that.
So it's great. I mean, I think we all understand if I have a big giant gob of data and I can look at it and understand it better, that we can at web scale data, we can get information that we would not have otherwise had. So what program do I put in to do it?
That's the point.
What's Splunk using? Anybody know?
Most business people don't want to know to the point.
But yeah, but we're SaaS companies, we're ISVs. We actually use technology around here.
I have to say,
you're seeing a wide range of platforms that are being deployed. I mean, in some cases, it's
now that's the analyst answer.
By the way, I'm going to say that I personally don't think that's true. Like Facebook, MySQL started databases. They don't use any of the next generation technology.
I completely agree. It's all over the map, and whether it's a relational, whether it's even just using an index schema against MySQL and not even leveraging the underlying relational capabilities. I mean, this is a wide open set of deployment.
So does it count as big data if you're using a relational database to do it?
Well, I'm a little confused by the question because big data is the problem. the tools and technologies you use to pull apart that data, to put it to good use for your business is the answer. Now, there are 100 different methods to do that, and proprietary and open source approaches among them.
I'm telling you, users don't really give a crap.
No,
right, exactly.
but this isn't a user
You know?
conference. This is a provider
But
conference.
at the end of the day,
But what's interesting, even about the makeup of this conference and the composition of the sponsor room behind us, is that there's a growing assortment of third parties who are providing BI solutions that can be embedded into other software solutions. And those ISVs obviously have their own responsibilities, but their end users, to Bill's point, don't care what the protocol is. All they want is the right dashboard with the right numbers that they configure in the right ways to meet their business requirements.
Yeah, sure. It's their job to go and provide that
Sort that out.
dashboard for them and use big data to get there.
Yep.
and there is an awful lot of interesting activity going on with these OEM deals
Yes.
for people white labeling. I mean, I even had some interesting conversations here with some folks, even as well as some open source plays, Pentaho and others, Pentaho, whatever the heck they use.
So here's one thing that I do get very excited about, and it comes from a past life of mine when I was in the analyst ranks at Meta Group. I helped to launch their benchmarking practice. It was a paper-based business back in the 90s, and gruesome. Nowadays, because of the multi-tenancy that we're all so fond of, there's the opportunity to aggregate the metadata across a population of users and use that information to provide real KPI statistics for benchmarking purposes that adds a whole new layer of value for customers. And in fact, creates a greater stickiness for those SaaS companies and other cloud companies who are out there who are trying to figure out how to better connect with their customers in an increasingly commoditized marketplace.
Well, I think what's interesting about big data is not the term and it's not the platform. It is the fact that we're getting to a lower level of granularity in being able to analyze and predict that is allowing businesses to analyze and do predictive analysis that changes the way that they do their businesses. Whatever you call it, whatever the platform is. I mean, we wrote a report about quote unquote big data that's all this Hadoop nonsense and all. Very few companies are really doing very much there, right? Except in marketing, a lot of work in marketing, right? But a lot of it is in-memory based structures, and you're throwing it out there in these sparse data structures, and you're squishing it all together and reformulating it, and it's a lot of it is dashboard.
So
But
we'll
here's
get off of the
something,
function.
Treb, you were asking about, why is this important to people in this audience? Here's a really important thing that's important, is that if you are not accumulating a huge wealth of kind of big data to be analyzed from the way that your users and customers are using your application, then you're missing out on the opportunity to benchmark and discover new information about what your application could be doing, about what you could be offering to your customers about the way that they use your application.
I'll state that it's super important. I didn't say that. I said it's super important to help teach them how to do it. So we'll go take it from the other side, though, because it is. So outside of business intelligence, not allowed to use BI. Can you give an example of a company that has used a big data type solution, has taken that information and created a significantly better experience or advantage for itself out in the market?
A provider or a user?
Software as a service company.
I'll give you one. Constant Contact. Email marketing company I use in my own backyard, and to the point of this benchmarking approach. A year ago, they sent me a little note, said, Mr. Kaplan, you've been a loyal customer, and like all of our customers, we've been keeping track of you. And we've got all this data we've accumulated, and if you click here, there's a matrix where you can compare and contrast yourself with other people in your industry. And lo and behold, there's a line that says consultants that shows me how each and every one of my email campaigns compares against the average in that category. Now, since that service was originated, almost every day they enhance it like any good software as a service company would, and now I have a line chart with each of my campaigns, and I can see how my KPIs of open rates and click-through rates compare and contrast with my peers. Now, the fact of the matter is, email marketing, software as a service solutions are becoming increasingly commoditized, but that's giving me an extra reason to stick around with a service that otherwise I could trade on any day.
Bill?
I think that's a great example. I'm going to give you the example of DataSift, which is the company built by the founders of TweetMe, UK company, one of 2 companies in the world that has access to the entire archive of Twitter output. And they provide a service which allows you to find information out of that Twitter archive, so that you can, for example, see who is tweeting about you, who's got a high level of influence. You can see who's linking to you in their tweet stream, and correlate that with influence statistics and other information. They've even used it to map relationships between Twitter activity around company names and stock market activity.
Yeah, so an example, here's an embedded, one of these OEM deals is Marketo, right? They embed, should I name who they embed, or does it matter?
Go ahead.
It's Pentaho, right? So they've just white labeled it, and it's now part of their offering, and in fact, it's part of their value proposition in going to market, right? And I think you're going to see a lot, and there's a half a dozen players, some in this room, that are going to market that way. This whole embedded, I mean, companies don't have enough, SaaS vendors don't have the time or the effort to develop the level of sophistication that is required. But not all SaaS applications require this either. So I think it depends on the nature. In that particular case, it's all about marketing, campaign analysis, et cetera.
Well, one of the other big topics, obviously, for the day, and I hesitate to bring it up, please do not tweet again that I don't like private cloud without saying that we have a solution for it. Please, please. I already got another raft of emails today. It's like people tweet the first sentence and they don't listen to the rest of the presentation. I'm getting in trouble for it. Let's talk about private clouds and public clouds and in the hybrid. You know, one of the things we just heard is that the people who can write the transition, the hybrid, are going to be the winners. Do you agree with that comment?
Say that again?
That the people who help with the transition, you know, basically from the traditional to the cloud are the next set of winners. That was posited in our last presentation. So is that really true, or is it going to be pure play guys?
Can we come up to a common definition of what hybrid is?
I'll use back to transition. People who bridge the world between a traditional, say, client-server architecture and a cloud architecture.
So there's some sort of intertwining between on-prem and cloud assets.
If you want to define it differently, that's fine. It's more on there. If
some people define hybrid as
not.
cloud to cloud, and we have a private, public, whatever. So that's what we're talking about. All right.
So are you asking us about private and public cloud or about hybrid cloud?
Or you can take it off. Is the hybrid cloud winners, the public cloud guys the winners in the long term?
Both. There's so much opportunity that Google, who's obviously focused for the time being at least on public alone, I'm not convinced that's always going to be the case, is going to have plenty of opportunities to succeed. The IBMs, the Oracles, the HPs, well, maybe not the HPs, but the IBMs and the Oracles are going to have plenty of opportunity as well. And hosting companies who've got a hybrid service delivery model are also going to find plenty of opportunities. The difference is not going to be about the technology deployment. It's going to be, again, about how they package and position themselves in terms of demonstrating relative value in those different delivery models.
You know, I was thinking how to answer this, because from one point of view, there is no such thing as private cloud. If you operate computing infrastructure today, you operate public cloud. You are in contact with the internet. You've probably got a website. You've probably got mobile users, remote users, people who work from home. They're all coming in across the internet.
What about all these appliances and like these pre-configured systems like IBM's pushing with Pure, I think what's it called, Pure System, right? Is that meet your definition?
Anything that is plugged into the internet is operating in the cloud. Now, it's probably, in most cases, a very badly run public cloud. because it's not built with the kind of scale-out replication, the kind of hardened security and infrastructure and high-performance reliability that you expect from the gold standard that's set for public cloud. And that's why most of the, if not all of the, security breach stories that we hear where stuff that people have put in the cloud has actually been stolen or revealed or whatever, is enterprises who don't know how to run clouds.
I think the whole public-private thing is going to go away. Within 3 years, we aren't going to be talking
about public and private cloud, because every enterprise operates a public cloud, and every public cloud provider
I think you guys have it right, frankly.
A private cloud.
You guys have it right. All you're doing is differentiating by adding some additional services on top of it and charging customers through the nose so they can get private cloud services.
Well done, Treb.
But it's basically the same thing.
Can you tweak that, please?
You're a client of mine. I know more than I should, but I think you guys have it basically right. You know, there's really no difference between the two, is there?
Just where the data sits.
But a lot of people use private cloud as, I call it denial cloud. You know, it's basically, they say, I want a private cloud because I don't want to mix with this internet stuff. You know, I'm going to build a cloud behind my enterprise firewall, which, of course, as everyone knows, is absolutely safe from external intrusion, because people look after their passwords, and you know, I can trust all the outsourced contractors that come in and run it for me. So, you know, I'm not going to take a risk with this public internet stuff.
So this is a great line into the next question. Reliability, number one inhibitor for adoption. So obviously stuff we can work on as an industry to both improve the quality and improve the perception of said quality. But the next four are all internal issues. You guys are advisors to not only the software as a service companies that are here, but you're also advisors to the businesses who have these internal problems. How does a company who's trying to win on the quality of their product and the value and what it does, and the right price points, get past these things, these inhibitors within the organization that has nothing to do with the quality of the price point?
Well, they do what they've always done. They stop talking to IT and they start talking to business people who don't believe IT in the first place. The fact of the matter is that you know, what we're dealing with here is denial and compromise, which is what a typical IT organization is all about. Right?
Oh, and fiefdoms.
Thank you very much.
What were the other four? Just do you have them?
They were all lack of operational control, organization resistance, fear of the unknown,
Right.
and I think, oh, that's right, I'm an old-time sys administrator, and I really like to set up new servers.
Yeah.
No,
So,
that was the fourth one, I forget. I think it's a big
These
part
are
of
the
it, by the way.
inhibitors. These weren't the technology
These are the
challenges.
inhibitors.
These
They
are
said
the
there's
inhibitors.
5
I
inhibitors.
think that's
Only
right.
one has any control. Do we have any control over as a provider, as in software as a service, or a cloud provider? The other 4 all have to do with organizational.
You know, I did a very funny project recently. I'll just share with you. I can't mention the client's name, but Fortune 100. You know, we 80% of our business is with providers, but we do quite a bit of work more recently with large, you know, corporations. And this was a very large financial services company. And it was, we actually got down into the guts of helping to build the RFP and helping to do the vendor selection and all that. And it amazed me at how these big corporations put up all these barriers and these walls to inhibit innovation, and how difficult they make it internally for anybody who wants to move anything forward, and how difficult, and it's all process issues, and all these barriers and walls. And I think in some ways it's to protect the corporation.
and the people who work there,
Yeah,
who are
the
afraid
internal
to be outplaced by this, what is perceived as an outsourcing alternative.
I think that's part of it,
Absolutely.
and clearly cloud is a threat, and
Yep.
in particular with the migration not only to a highly virtualized, you know, external hosted cloud services, but also these highly configured boxes, right? The number of people you need to do internal system integration is going to go way down. There is a real fear there. But it's not just that. It's also to protect it against some rogue, you know, person in the organization who does some crazy thing. So it actually dumbfounded me, the process inhibitors to drive innovation. It was very interesting.
We've never seen a banker with all those controls gamble away $7 billion worth of people's money. Let's open it up for some questions out of the group, and then I'll have one final question for the guys out there. So questions from the people out in the audience?
Actually, can I ask a question while we do this? Can I just ask a question of the panel? What was your number one takeaway from the conference? I know what mine is. The religious wars are gone. That's one of the. I didn't hear a lot of religion here anymore. And if you go
In
back,
terms of?
Whether it's 2 years ago, everything was about pure cloud, and there was no realism related. Everything was going to go. It's either black or white, right? Mm-hmm. Or the religious wars about multi-tenant. Everything had to be multi. I mean, a lot of I think there's a more realism. There's a much more realistic assessment of how this is going to play out. And a lot of the religious fervor. Is that a fair comment, you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I would just say, though, that there's still a huge gulf of understanding. I think that ISVs, particularly ISVs who are coming from a conventional background, really still need to get their heads around what it means to do cloud and SaaS. And there's still
a lot of denial, you think?
I think there's a lot of denial and a lot of skills and expertise that people still need to get.
Yeah, what I would add is that I think that, and this wasn't actually spoken, this was just a sense.
Yeah.
I think that everybody knows that we're well beyond what is it and why is it, and we're into where, when, and how. But with that in mind, and this cloud rush impact that we're all facing, where it's harder and harder to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace, I think a lot of people are searching for, how do I best position myself to survive and succeed in that environment?
Okay, questions out in the audience?
Hi. Do you think from the context of business users that the power has really shifted to them away from IT, and regardless of what IT does between SaaS and cloud, and the people in IT who are part of the adopters of asking for forgiveness rather than permission? Do you think IT is just going to continue to lose real estate as business users adopt more and more unless they change?
Well, I think IT actually has a very important role, but IT becomes the custodian of the IT infrastructure rather than being the operator of it and the firefighter of it. But actually, they can deliver a better service and become like heroes, as I like to say, by helping their organization adopt cloud. But I think that one of the interesting things about cloud is that it is disruptive technology, absolutely. But it's disruptive in a good way for business people, because it means they can do all kinds of new stuff, and therefore they drive to adopt it as quickly as possible. But it's disruptive in a bad way for IT people, because they're the ones who have all their routines disrupted and have to learn new skills and have to do things in a different way. And so that's why you get the resistance from the IT people, and why actually I disagreed with some of the advice that Nick said about, if people raise security issues, you should engage with them. Actually, if they raise security issues, back off, because they're not ready yet, and actually talk to people that have a business incentive to actually move forward and adopt this stuff, because they're not going to worry about the security. They'll just assume that it's taken care of.
So it's a broad question, and we're talking about all segments. If I were to narrow it a bit more to, let's say, upper mid to large enterprises, right? IT's not going away. IT's going to be there. The IT systems that are there are going to be there forever. I think there's a big illusion about how much of the existing workload is going to get migrated. I think that you have to do some really hard work to figure out what are the attributes that really make sense. I mean, if an application is stable and it sits there, why the heck move it anywhere, right? I think that there will be a downsizing of staff, which due to a wide variety of reasons, and therefore there's a pushback. But in my experience, at least at the senior levels of IT, they get it, and they have an obligation to the business. And they're well beyond the learning curve, and they view the cloud as a set of assets, a set of arrows in their quiver, and they will deploy as needed, right? And the power has shifted to the business more so than ever before, in different organizations, different industries at different percentages. But IT's not going away. They're going to be the custodians of the data, and their skills are going to shift, where increasingly will be less technical. There'll still be technical skills, but it'll be about relationship management and contract management and managing the suppliers, and it'll be a different role and goal in the company.
Well, I think IT is going away. I mean, in the sense, I'm sorry to
That's all right, you
can
can
leap
disagree.
in there, but
Is this like a Jane Curtin, you poor ignorant slut?
no, it's not. You know that I will always be a gentleman, Bill. Always a gentleman. Might bitch a bit, but that's as far as it will go. So so what was I saying?
I have no idea.
You wanted to disagree with me. For some reason, you wanted to disagree with me.
They said IT is going away.
But what we see increasingly,
IT is not going
it is
away.
going away. If you look at the companies that are going all in the cloud, then a lot of, or even some that are not. But I was speaking to someone whose job title was director of marketing and IT. Business that whose business runs on the cloud, and therefore the product is wrapped up in the technology.
I think there's very few, and I reserve my comments to upper mid to large enterprises.
Right.
There are very few that can go 100% in the cloud.
Right.
It's unrealistic.
But they're not 100% in the cloud. Absolutely, they operate their own stuff as well. But the director of marketing is in charge of IT because
I
the
agree with
product
that.
is a technology product. And increasingly, I think we're going to see IT dividing up. There's going to be sort of there's going to be a lot of people for whom
businesses
for whom technology
Yeah, I would agree with that.
is core of their operations. And so it's going to be under the COO, or it's going to be under the CFO, or it's going to be under the CTO, but you're not going to have a separate CIO anymore.
Their authority is obviously being eroded. And what you're seeing is, incrementally, what ends up happening is there's this circumvention of IT, and then IT figures out where the equilibrium is again around governance, right? So a perfect example, what a lot of companies are going through right now is the bring your own device syndrome, right? So for a long time, people fought, or IT fought, the iPhone and the smartphone and all the rest, but more and more enterprises are figuring out the right policies to, in fact, permit the utilization of devices of choice. A year ago, that wouldn't have happened. It's kind of like, by the way, if you remember about 10 years ago, if you asked the CIO if they would allow instant messaging into their organizations, they said, no, that's what our teenage daughters do. We don't do instant messaging because of whatever security concern they had. Now there is not an enterprise on earth that doesn't use instant messaging for business purposes.
I talked to the CIO of, I think it was called Dominion Enterprises, the Canadian, they do marketing services, these huge big databases they have. And he made an interesting point. He said, listen, my end users, my business client, my internal business clients, they increasingly are going and procuring direct services. So my biggest challenge is I have to figure out a way to provide value-added services so I can broker it. Otherwise, I am disintermediated.
Right.
Now that's a real scenario.
Right.
Right? That's his challenge. What is the value add at what cost for the corporation to provide standards or provide guidance or contracting or whatever the service might be? It might not be technical services, right? And that's the new rub in the new mission for IT.
Another question.
It's a bit of a climb down, though, isn't it? Kind of IT services contract manager down from CIO.
Well, I for these big corporations, IT's not going away, man.
Dave, anybody other questions? Out in the audience.
We've intimidated them.
Yeah, we have intimidated them.
Well, Treb, you were asking about hybrid, and we didn't really answer that question, did we?
You want to go back into onto the hybrid? Are the guys who work over the pure plays? You're going to take this in the end.
I've got a question. I've been threatening to throw this question out. So, Bill, you were talking about what's it called, boundless enterprise?
Boundary-free enterprise.
Thank you, boundary-free.
My buddy Mike West, who works for me, came up with
He's a good guy, great guy. It's a great term. This
I
guy.
disagree with that, by the way, just so we have some.
Okay, so here we go.
Mike West is a total tool.
This is great.
He's such a jerk. Go ahead.
That's great. Excellent. Excellent. And this guy's written about something he calls frictionless enterprise.
No, he's writing a book, he tells me.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So go at it. Go at it. And listen back here and listen to this one.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Well, I think boundary-free is part of the whole frictionless picture.
So he's saying.
You've got a broader vision.
I knew that. That's what I was hearing. Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
That's the
I
end?
think so.
Our terminology, I think, is really just that rather than looking at internal process improvement, we came up with language like, language is important. Cloud IT and cloud business. We started using that a couple of years ago. So around the cloud as a driver of cost savings or internal process improvement, or cloud business in terms of how the cloud can be used externally. I think our previous speaker said it in slightly different ways. I like that portion of his presentation because it's internal and it's external. Whether it's about partner networks, whether it's about the supply chain, whether it's about the creation of new services, cloud-enabled services. We've done some interesting consulting work with traditional businesses in that regard. So the boundary-free enterprises kind of encapsulates those in the sense that technology is being applied not only internally but externally across all of those domains of cloud, mobile, social, and analytics. So we're redefining how we're running our companies. We're boundary-free enterprises. That's kind of our through loosely coupled architectures.
I mean,
I had to get some techie stuff in.
What frictionless is about is very much the concept that the internet platform is really just turning the world inside out the way that it operates. That if you're not able to connect and plug into all of the resources that are out there, into what your customers are doing and want, into your partner networks, your supplier networks, into all the big data that's out there. Forgive me, Treb, for using the word again. But if you're not able to do that, if you're not outward facing in the way that your entire infrastructure operates, then you will miss out because other people will be able to plug into those opportunities and work on them faster. And so frictionless is taking the friction out of the interactions that we have and harks back to the theories of the firm that were developed in the 1930s that said that you need, in the industrial era, you need as big a firm as possible because it's much cheaper to have all these resources in-house. Well, today, it's much cheaper for most of us to just grab the resources from the web because they can be provisioned more cost effectively and much faster than if we actually have to build them in-house ourselves. And that's a big fundamental change in the way that enterprises are organized.
So I've got one last question, or maybe a request is a better one. You guys are all very expensive, and because of the high quality advice you get, so we're gonna get some freebies for the group out here. One piece of advice you would give the companies here that they can take back with them and kind of put in that it would make them more successful or help them compete in the market, help them win in their respective spaces, something they should be thinking about or making sure they're doing.
All right, so I'll pick up on that comment, friction. You should be continuously focused on where the business problem resides, or if you're focused on IT management, we'll say the IT problem resides. Where is the greatest friction in their processes that you can help to alleviate? And who is the individual responsible for dealing with that issue on a day-to-day basis? Because if you can identify that problem, identify that person, and clearly and easily supply them with a solution that can quickly remedy that issue or at least give them a sense of alleviating that problem, that's where business success is going to be in our marketplace.
Always look at the business context. Don't get too focused on the technology. Because at the end of the day, what you've got to do is to deliver business results to people, and particularly in today's cloud environment, the ability to deliver business results is much higher than ever before. We moved away from the whole batch mode thing of saying, I have a business requirement, shove it out to IT, 9 months later it comes back, oh, that's not what I wanted. Right now, you can fine-tune as a business person what you want in a very iterative, immediate way. And you, as ISVs, need to be focusing on delivering those business results and make it easier and easier for the business people to get their jobs done. And the technology is just a servant and a slave to that.
I would have kind of two related things related to your positioning and messaging. One would be to, when you segment potential customers, think about the fact that there's a wide range of experiences and where they're at in the journey, right? I talked about this yesterday, right? the early part of the journey is all about cost. And therefore, messaging needs to be around that, right? And while cost doesn't go away, the more experiences that a client has, the more that yes, cost is important, but it's about not just the business flexibility and adaptability, it's about the business, right? It's not technology, it's business. So think about your messaging in the context of the journey, and it turns out you segment and go to market relative to different customers. And the second is stop, thinking about these technologies as separate domains, right? You got cloud, you have social, this is all part of the new master architecture. They're all related. And it's at the intersection of these technologies, whatever it might be with your particular value-added service, that you want to position these things.
I think that's great advice. Very good advice. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for not just this panel, but all you've done for making this show what it has become over the last 5 years. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.